It is Labor Day weekend, and I think most of us are going to enjoy a day off tomorrow. Most everywhere kind of gets a break for tomorrow. We get to close down. The history of Labor Day is it's interesting. It was made a national holiday in 1894, and really it came out of a low point for industry and for labor in our country. It was at a really low point. Workers were working 12 hours a day or more, 7 days a week. It was kind of the height of the Industrial Revolution, so people had moved off of agricultural living and into this world of industry and production and working in factories, and things were not good. And so it was birthed out of that we said, you know what, we need to change some things. And Labor Day really just became a day to celebrate the workers, to celebrate the laborers. And then along with that, there were some laws and some changes that were made in order to honor the work that people do and to make conditions better and safer for people. And so Labor Day is a day of rest. But what about Tuesday? What about the next day when you've got to go back to work, or you go back into school, or your setting, whether you're a manual labor, a blue-collar worker, or a white-collar worker, whether you're a student, an instructor, a teacher, we all have work to do. And what does that look like as a follower of Jesus Christ? Let me ask you, have you ever had a bad job? Have you ever had a bad job? I've had a lot of bad jobs. A lot of difficult jobs, challenging jobs. I've worked everything from retail to manual labor and everywhere in between. And I worked out in the summer of Texas for 5 summers mowing grass, and that was a really difficult job, but it was also rewarding. I worked for a moving company out in Southern California, moving mostly businesses. It was weird work. It was the work that I've shared with some of you before. It's a work where smoke breaks for my coworkers consisted of going out to their car and huffing crystal meth. And it was the summer of 1999, working for a moving company in San Diego, that I determined I do not want to have a job that makes me want to smoke crystal meth. And so I went back to school and I got a degree and I got a different job. I didn't want that to be the path that I was headed down. We all have had interesting jobs, maybe not all making us want to smoke crystal meth, but I think we can all recall interesting jobs that we've had. And the reality is that there's always going to be some level of pain and struggle and hardship when it comes to our work. There's always going to be some level of pain and hardship and struggle when it comes to our work, no matter what it is, no matter what that work is. Again, whether you're blue collar or white collar. And the question is why? Why is that true? And as followers of Jesus Christ, we have a perspective on that. And our perspective is really twofold. Number one, it comes from the curse that we're under. And number two, it comes from human desire that we all have. And I'll explain that briefly. We read about the curse in Genesis 3, that humanity pushed back against God. We turned our back on God. We decided to go our own way. We decided to not obey the instructions and the laws that God had given. And we said, you know what, I think we can do it better. And whenever we did that, we severed a relationship, a perfect relationship that we had with God. And with that came a curse. And with that curse was that our labor will be difficult and it will be a struggle. I'll read again from Genesis 3. It said, God says, by the sweat of your face you shall eat bread until you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken, for you are dust, and to dust you shall return. We've been given a curse has been placed upon us, and not just a curse placed upon us about work, but also a blessing lost. There was a blessing in the garden before the fall, that our work was immediately meaningful. Our work had purpose. Our work had joy. Our work had satisfaction. And after the fall, when the curse came, not only were we cursed and was work toilsome, but it was toilsome because the blessing had been removed, and that blessing being satisfaction and purpose and meaning and joy in our work. And instead, it became toilsome and labor and hard and difficult. And by the sweat of our brow, that's how we will eat. And so we have this curse that humanity is under because of the fall, because of our own sin. But then it gets complicated. There's another layer that gets added onto that. Because of our sin and because of our separation from God, we are all born in a condition that is not okay. We are all born in a condition that's not okay. But yet we have this desire within us to make it seem like we're all okay. And so what we try to do is we try to grab onto other things in this life and in this world to make us feel about the not okay condition that we're in. And so what we do oftentimes is we take work, which has a curse to it, which is laborious, which is a struggle, and then we compound it by trying to place our meaning and our value and our purpose and our justification for living onto that. And so we take something that inherently has a curse, and then we compound it by saying, that's what I want to find my ultimate meaning in, is work. And the weight of those two things combined crush us. And work is exhausting, and work burns you out, and work is a struggle because we try to use it to define who we are ultimately instead of seeing it differently. And so how do we see it differently? How do we see that differently? And is there a way that we can avoid work being a struggle? Is there a way that we can avoid work being difficult and arduous and laborious? Okay, here's the bad news. I don't think there is. This side of heaven, I don't think that there is. There are ways that we can deal with it, and there are best practices that we can use, but I don't think that we as sinful human beings will ever be able to get out from underneath the burden of work. There will always be some level of burden and struggle in our work. However, in Christ, we are made new, and we can see our work differently. And not only can we see our work differently, but we can see our relationship and our being in this world differently, and that impacts how we work. That impacts how we view the work that we do. In Colossians, Paul says this, and I want you to take note of who he's addressing as well in this. He says, "Bondservants, obey in everything those who are your earthly masters, not by way of eye service as people pleasers, but with sincerity of heart, fearing the Lord. Whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men." I'll summarize what Paul is saying there. Give your job your best, give your work your best, but give God your heart. Give your job your best and work at it diligently and faithfully, not just giving eye candy or eye service, not eye candy, not just giving eye service to those around you, not just doing it when your boss is looking or when your supervisor is looking, but doing it with sincerity of heart, having character in your work. Give your work your best, but give God your heart. Your work is not who you are. Your work does not define your being. Your work does not give you value or worth on this earth. It does not justify your existence. It doesn't justify the resources that you take up and use as a human being on this planet. You were given worth and value and meaning and purpose apart from your work. But give your work your best. Nothing is solved by being lazy. Nothing is helped by being short in your work and only doing your best whenever someone is watching you and looking down on you. But be sincere in your work. Work at it diligently because there is one that you are working for that is greater. Paul says, whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men. Work heartily for the Lord and not for men. You see, because if God is in charge, if God is the Lord of all of this creation, then he is the one ultimately that we are working for. He is the one that we are ultimately working for. And when Paul says that work at it with sincerity and honesty and integrity, because the Lord is the one who is watching you, we can take that one of two ways. We can take that as a threat. God's watching. I better mind my manners. I better look good. I better look sharp because God is watching me. Or we can take it a different way. And the context of this letter that Paul is writing is he is writing it to believers. He's writing it to the church in Colossus, and they know the Lord. They know the gospel. They know that they have been transformed by the grace of Jesus Christ. And so they know that the God that is watching them, the God that they ultimately work for, they know that He is a loving God. He is a God who has rescued them and redeemed them and transformed them and claimed them as His own. He is a God that has laid down His life for them by giving them His Son, Jesus Christ. That is the God that you work for. And we work diligently and we work hard for Him because He has loved us. You see, at our baptism, God made a promise and a claim on your life. And it's not just about your spiritual life or your life here in the church, but it's about your entire life. And that even includes your work. And He says that He has redeemed even your work, even the most mundane job that you could ever have, even working for a moving company in Southern California. He has redeemed that work. That is the God that you serve. That is the God who is watching over you. That He has made a claim on your life and a claim on your work, and He has redeemed you. That's why He can say, whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men. And He goes on to say this, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You are serving the Lord Christ. For the wrongdoer will be paid back for the wrong he has done, and there is no partiality. This promise that God makes in our life, it manifests itself in two promises that Paul hits on right here in Colossians. There's two promises that God makes to you. The two promises are this, that in your weariness and in your exhaustion in work, you are upheld by an inheritance that you will receive from Him. You will receive an inheritance that no one can take away. He also says that in your emptiness and in your brokenness and in your frustration, you are upheld by ultimate justice that will come. You are upheld by ultimate justice that will come to you. I want you to notice the words that Paul uses there. He says inheritance. He intentionally uses the word inheritance there. Because whenever we work, we get a wage, right? We work for a wage, but we receive an inheritance. And you receive an inheritance not because you have worked hard for that inheritance. It's not because of anything that you have done, but it's because of your place in the family. And so Paul is writing this, and he's addressing bondservants. So he's addressing people who are low in society, who may not have a family. They've been attached to a family, and they've been attached to that family through service. Some of them could be in a good situation. Some of them could be in a bad situation. And Paul writes to them, and he says, you will receive an inheritance, not a wage for your work, but you will receive an inheritance because of the place that you have in the family. You will receive just as much as those who have been born into the family. You will receive an inheritance in Him. That is what we have in Christ. Not a wage for the work that we have done, but an inheritance because of the place that we have in the family. That is the Lord who is watching over us, who is looking upon us, who is guarding and protecting us, who has made a promise and a claim in our life. And so we give our work our best, but we give God our heart because He has redeemed us and called us to Him. But he goes on to say this. He goes on to say that the evildoer will be paid back for the wrong that he has done, and there is no partiality. There will be justice. The wrongdoer, the evil ones, will be paid for their acts, for their work, for what they have done. They will not receive the inheritance, but they will receive perfect and holy justice from the Lord in the end. And so we can take heart that God is watching. God is watching lovingly over his people, and God is watching with perfect justice over this world, and justice will come. Just like the late 1800s when Labor Day came into effect, there was some serious injustice happening. And there to this day is still some serious injustice happening. And if you're in a really bad work situation, do what you can to get out of it. Do what you can to get out of it. But also know that the Lord is watching over you. He is watching over you with an inheritance. And he is watching over you with perfect justice. And he is caring for you. Even in the midst of frustration and difficulty and pain, the Lord is watching. If you're here today on Memorial Weekend and you're burned out, you're tired, work is a struggle, you don't really want to think about Tuesday morning, I want you to know this. I want you to know that you're not far from God. I want you to know that God is close. Because where God sets up his office and where he does his best work isn't far away, but it's right when you're at the end of your rope. When you have nothing left to give, that's where God meets you, right in your place of pain and difficulty, in burnout, in exhaustion. That's where Christ sets up shop and does work in your life. So you are not far from God, but he is drawing near to you. And he is here to rescue you and to redeem you, to promise you an inheritance, to promise you that justice will be served. Give him your heart. On Tuesday, give work your best. Work diligently, work faithfully, work honestly. But know that your inheritance, not your wage, but your inheritance and your worth and your value is in him. So as I'll close with these words. The boss of all bosses loves you. The father of all fathers has an inheritance for you. The king of all kings will bring justice for you, because the Lord of all lords has died for you. And so this weekend and tomorrow, may you rest in him, and then may we work in his grace and his love and his mercy. Amen.